Now, with that as the background, I couldn't be more excited to officially announce the next generation of our creative apps. Going forward, our creative applications will be branded CC, not CS. CC represents the next generation of Adobe apps that are fully integrated with Creative Cloud. Photoshop CC, Illustrator Cc, InDesign Cc, and all the other apps you know and love will continue to run on your desktop, whether you're connected to the internet or not. But they're intimately tied into the process that I just described when you're connected. But it's always better to show than tell. So we're going to walk through each of these steps. Now, buckle up, because it's going to be we have a lot of demos to show you. But we're going to start with my favorite features in the new CC apps. And to help get us started with this, I'd like to invite up Terry White. Hey, Terry.
Thanks, David.
All right, so here's the situation. We are Terry and I are going to work to build a website for a tour company, and we're going to start by getting the assets together, the photos in particular, to start with.
So let's get started. So the first thing I like to do is head right to my Creative Cloud folder, and inside that folder I've got another one, and we'll just go ahead and open it up, and we'll select all the images there, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to your first look at the brand new Photoshop Cc.
All right.
We'll just get those images open. So I thought we could work, first of all, non-destructively. So I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of converting all these layers to smart objects. Now with this first image, you can tell, taking an image from the skyline, especially from the street or from up above, you end up with maybe a potential of it being crooked, but more importantly, you end up with the perspective being off.
Right.
So we've had great technology in the past to adjust automatically for lens corrections. For example, taking the curvature out of fisheye. But we never really had a good technology for not only leveling the images, but also correcting the perspective. So I'm going to introduce you to my first favorite feature before we get to that one, and that is the ability now to use Camera Raw as a filter. Whereas in the past, I'd have to close the image, open it back up in Camera Raw just to make these adjustments. Now I can head to Camera Raw with that image open, and again, do a non-destructive workflow. So we'll head over to the lens corrections area. I'll hit manual, and of course, the first thing I'm tempted to do is click auto, because we want it to do it automatically. But then I'd never get a chance to show them the manual ways of doing it. So let's just say you needed to correct it horizontally. We do that, and it automatically levels the image. It detects the horizon and does that for us. Now, if I wanted to do it vertically, I can do that. And I can also show the grid that it's working on behind the scenes, what it's aligning to. But of course, we want it to do it in both directions. So we'll do that, and it'll take care of it. But more importantly, let's see what auto would have done for us. So I click auto, here's your before, and here's your after.
It's a huge time saver, obviously, for photographs. You see a lot of those kinds of perspective distortions. Now, this is one kind of perspective distortion that I think we all have when you're looking up at a tall set of buildings. But there are other kinds, too. You want to show us one more?
I think there's one that will hit a little bit more towards home. So let's open up our next image here. And we've got the puppy in the window. Oh.
You got to give it up for the puppy in the window. Thank you.
Now, in this case, the perspective's off from the side. And it would have been great if we could have taken the image a little bit more to the left, but then we'd be in a neighbor's yard. The neighbor has a bigger dog, so we didn't want to do that. So let's head right back into filter, Camera Raw as a filter. And once again, head over to our lens corrections. And now we'll just go and have it do it both directions at the same time. So here's your before, and here's your after.
It's literally like you picked up the cameraman and moved him over there.
Exactly.
That's pretty remarkable. Now obviously Photoshop's done a pretty good job here, but what if you wanted to tweak it a little bit?
Well, you know, automatic or having to do this, these adjustments is just really using algorithms in the background to kind of detect it. But your eye, as the photographer, is really the final judge. So if I go in and I want to manually tweak it a little more, we've got all these great transformations here. So I can pick up the camera and move it a little bit more to the right or a little bit more to the left and get it dead on. And once I've done that, that's created kind of a cropping opportunity. So I don't want to have to back out of this just to grab the crop tool. we'll just go ahead and use a transformation to scale it up ever so much to get it just right. So that takes care of moving the camera over after the fact. Now, we've got more. So let's head over to this next image. And in this image, this is actually one that I took 2 or 3 years ago. And as you can see, it was a dark church. You can barely see what's going on inside. There was a light or window near the ceiling providing natural light. And it lit the banister, the floor, the side wall there. But I always wished I could go back and reshoot the scene with more light. Well, I've got Photoshop Cc.
Let's see what we can do.
So let's go up to our filter menu. And let's take a look at the brand new Radial Filter. Now the Radial Filter, I'm going to use it just for an exposure adjustment, but it could be used for temperature, your white balance, contrast, highlights, shadows, clarity, just about any adjustment you want. And again, these are all non-destructive. So when I brought this image up, I said, well, let's start with a little bit more light on the banister. And I just drug out the Radial Filter and said, okay, let's crank up the exposure. And to my surprise, there were words on the wall that I completely forgot about that the camera sensor picked up. So I can actually go in and just take a quick look. Yep, there's stuff there. Now, you might argue, well, isn't that just like a vignette? Couldn't you do that with a vignette? And vignettes are typically from the center, and more importantly, you only get one. With the Radial Filter, I can make as many adjustments as I need throughout the image. And I can even pick this up and walk around with my own personal flashlight throughout the room. So this is where this technology comes in.
That's pretty cool. You can also do offset, right? You can tilt that a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, left and right. I can tilt this, I can make it smaller. I can create as many of these as I need, making all kinds of adjustments throughout the scene. I use this a ton already.
So go through all of your photo libraries and find those underexposed images. They can bring them back now. So what else do we have?
Well, we have the typical image that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So in the past, I would have gone in, again, trying to do everything non-destructively. I would have gone into Camera Raw, and I would have used the adjustment brush. But the adjustment brush has always been a circle. So for example, I can go ahead and just do spot healing, and that's great for correcting small elements in the photo or sensor dust, and I can go in and click. But what's new about this technique is that I can now do it.
One more. Sorry, I'm a little obsessive.
That one?
Yes, please.
That's the only one that's bothering you?
I think everyone would appreciate it if you would take care of that one.
All right.
Thank you.
Got it? Okay. Sure, you sure?
I'm set.
Okay.
I'm all set.
Right. So, but what if I need to correct something that doesn't fit well in a circle? So for the first time, I've got the ability to use the adjustment brush as a non-circular healing tool. So I can now drag it out and correct the image just the way I need to, and again, pick up the source or pick up the sample area and correct it as I need to. And there we are.
That's great. So Photoshop CC, lots of new features. Terry just showed you 3 of them, but there's one more we want to show you.
Yes.
For those of you who were at Max last time, 18 months ago, as you know, we do a sneak on the second day, and we'll have it again tomorrow. So if you have never been to Max, definitely check out the sneaks, where we show technology that's in the labs and it's not ready yet for prime time. Again, as I said, I've been coming for 12 years, and one of the features we snuck last year had a reaction that I have never seen before, and it was a Photoshop feature called deblur.
Right.
You want to show us where we are with that?
It's my pleasure. So, as David mentioned, this was kind of technology we're just starting to work on, or starting to really be able to show it a year ago. Now it's made its way into Photoshop CC. Everything I've shown to date has been, or today, has been a part of Camera Raw. This is actually built into Photoshop CC. So I'm going to go into my filter menu and come down to the brand new shake reduction. But before I do that, let me explain a little bit about what's going on in this photo. Now, in the photo itself, you've got this waterfall where the water's moving rapidly, but you kind of want to give it that smooth, silky, cloud-like look. And in order to do that, the photographer would set the camera on a tripod, do a long exposure where the shutter's open for 10, 15, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to kind of blur the motion of the water. But obviously, we want all the things that aren't moving not to be blurry. Those should be tack sharp. And what happens if the tripod shakes a little, the water hits it, wind blows it, the photographer taps it a little bit, It's, even just for a split second, you're going to cause blur throughout the entire image. So now with filter, sharpen, shake reduction, it will analyze the photo right off the bat without me having to do anything. And just, even if I don't do any more, just a quick before and after. It's already taken care of the camera shake that happened.
Now this is a really technical shot, and we'll show a better example in a second, but we wanted to start with this because shake reduction happens in a lot of different ways. The camera doesn't always just move linearly, it could tilt. So different parts are going to have different kind of blurs.
Exactly. So with this technology, I can have it analyze more than one area of the photo. I can go ahead and drag out another blur estimation region, and it will now analyze that area of the photo. And if we zoom in, we can see that, well, the first one is a little bit left and right. This one's shooting off into the right, where the camera shook in that area of the photo in that direction. So now, again, I can have it analyze the photo before and after to get it that much sharper.
Now that's obviously a really good technical one. Let's show them one of the wow ones.
All right, let's do that. Actually, let's get out of this, and let's head over to, I've got one more. I think this one will hit home a little bit more. This is the one we've all seen.
I've got plenty of those.
Yes, I think they used a lot of your images to make this filter work. All right.
Unfortunately.
So let's go to our filter menu, come down to sharpen, and shake reduction. And again, I don't have to do anything else. Photoshop CC analyzes it, and here is your before, and here's your after.
Great. So all of that new in Photoshop CC.
And non-destructively, all smart object aware.
And your favorite feature, the non-destructive element.
Yes.
So the other thing we wanted to show you, obviously we now have the photos we need for this website. Let's go work on some of the illustrations. So why don't we take a look at Illustrator Cc?
All right, let's head over to the brand new Illustrator Cc. So I'm zoomed in on a map that kind of has a beige kind of stroke for the road. I thought I could make this road a little bit more organic. So let me head up to one of my custom views, and we're just going to go over to create a couple of brushes. I'm going to bring up the brushes panel, and while you can create custom brushes in previous versions of Illustrator, what you couldn't do before is take something bitmapped and turn it into a brush. So here's a bitmapped image. I'm just going to drag it into the brushes panel. We're going to go ahead and make it into an art brush, and what I can do is I can tell it where to scale the brush from. So I don't want the leaves to scale and stretch and get distorted, just the branch itself. So now we'll go ahead and click OK. That's my new brush. We'll hit the brush tool, and now for the first time, taking a photograph and making it into a brush is just that easy.
That's great. So now for the Illustrator users out there, you could technically do this in the last, in Illustrator CS6, but CC takes it to an all-new level in productivity.
Well, it takes it to a new level because before I would have had to have drawn the elements or traced the elements to turn into a brush. Now I'm able to not only convert vectors into a brush that I couldn't draw.
Right.
You've
I'm aware.
seen me draw, yes. And it will automatically create the corners as well, which we didn't do before. So we have some great technology in that area. So let's go to my layers panel quickly, and let's just simply turn on my new road with the new brush. All right, one more thing. How about some typography? Anyone work with type out there? All right. I think you're going to like this. Let's head up to our view. Let's just zoom in a little bit more on that peaks text. Let's grab the type tool, and of course, this is a word that we can highlight. So we typically do this all day long. We type a word, type a phrase, style it with a font, size, stroke, color, all that. But if you wanted to individually manipulate the characters, if you wanted to move one character up a little bit or down a little bit or rotate it, you would have to then break it all up into separate frames. Now for the first time, we've got a brand new touch type tool. So without having to break the word up, I can grab the touch type tool, click on it. I have controls for those individual characters. So I can just organically make that one bigger. I can even rotate that one if I thought it would make my design better, but I think we won't go that far.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't. So and we can also just have a kerning or tracking opportunity just organically by dragging this around.
So while you're doing that, Terry, do you want to explain why this is called Touch Type?
The reason it's called Touch Type is because if you've got a Wacom Cintiq Touch or a Microsoft Surface or any other display that's touch-enabled, this tool actually works with your fingers. It's multi-touch aware, built into the software. So I can do that as well.
And we have the affordances come up when we recognize it's touch. So this is really our first step into taking some of our CC apps and touch enabling them for the new set of hardware coming out.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you,
very
David.
good. Appreciate it.
That's good.
So now that we have all of our assets, the static assets, the photos and the images, the graphics, obviously in any modern website, we want video. So for that, I'd like to invite up Jason Levine이.
Hey,
Long
David.
stage. Hey,
Good to see
Jason.
you.
So first, before we get started, congratulations to Jason. Jason and team just got back from NAB. If you're not aware of what NAB is, it's the largest broadcast video show that we have in the US. And the video products won 6 Best of Show awards, which is fantastic. And for all you Premiere fans, Premiere officially took the #1 spot, both in terms of market share and in terms of perception.
Yes.
So obviously hard at
Long
work.
time coming, we made it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Been working really hard at that
Yes.
one. So why is it #1? What's going on with the video tools? What have we
Right,
shown?
okay, so David, we're going to take a look at some After Effects stuff to start here. And if you take a look at this video, again, we're trying to bring this into this Wild Isles theme. You can see that we've got these people in a field, we've got an SUV. And David mentioned that he wanted me to make this video look a bit more rugged. And I thought, what better way to do that, perhaps, than to add something like a grill guard to the front of this SUV. And to do that, I would probably implement something like a 3D object. Well, now it is my absolute pleasure to tell you that when you download After Effects CC from the Creative Cloud, it comes bundled with Maxon Cinema 4D Lite, a 3D modeling application you can, yes! You can build your own models, you can download models, you can even work with models that you've worked with in Photoshop and bring them into Maxon. And now you have what is called a direct live 3D pipeline right into After Effects CC. So I'm going to show you some of that now.
Take a look.
Now, before we do that, the first thing we need to do when we're working with After Effects in a 3D application is establish tracking points. The 3D app needs to understand things like perspective in the ground and the objects that are parented on the ground. So to do that, we're going to start by using our enhanced 3D camera tracker. And when I do that, you'll see that it's going to place a series of 3D tracking points over top of my 2D footage here. And one of the new things that we have is that now I can come along the ground, and I can select the points along the ground, and I can do what's called create a ground or origin plane. And this is automatically going to tell Maxon Cinema 4D Lite where the ground is so that it understands the ground and all the things that are actually sitting on the ground. Now, moving forward a couple of frames, I'll come over to the front of the grill, and now I can actually select these points here, and I can right-click and I can choose Create Solid and Camera. And now you can see we have this beautifully tracked solid along the front of the grill, and this is effectively where we will parent that 3D object. So at this point now, this is where we're going to start to see that live 3D pipeline. Because right from within After Effects CC, I can export that tracking data directly to Maxon, and then from within After Effects CC, I can launch Maxon Cinema 4D right here. And when I do that, and I bring in that tracking data, now you can actually see that we have our ground plane established and our solid. So at this point, all I actually need to do is bring in that 3D model and parent the two together. So I'm going to come up to my File menu here. I'll choose Merge. We'll grab my grill guard. Click on Open. And then I'm just going to reorient some of my layers here so I can reposition this and kind of bring this in a little bit closer. So I'll go over to my coordinates here. And let's go ahead and zero these out. Again, sort of positioning that grill guard a bit closer to our solid, just like that. A couple of clicks, and now you can see we have the 3D object parented to that tracked solid. So now when I would go back to After Effects and I'd import that object, here's what we have.
It looks mostly good.
Mostly good.
And unfortunately, it looks like they got in an accident and they're scared and lost. So perhaps.
Well,
perhaps
David, you wanted it rugged.
Not that rugged. So if we could de-rug it a little bit, that would be great.
Well, this actually brings up a good point, because the traditional workflow between the 3D application and After Effects, you were doing things somewhat blindly. In other words, you would be doing your 3D work, you would render, which was very long, very intensive, and then you would bring that file, you'd import it into After Effects, and then you'd place it inside the composition, and you would look at it, you'd go, oh, mistake! And then you'd go back to the 3D app, and then you'd make that change, and then you would re-render, and then you would re-import, and then you would reinsert, and then you would watch it again, and oh!
I'm guessing there must be a better way.
There's a better way.
Let's take a look.
Calm. So now, right from the After Effects composition panel, you can see that we have the Cinema 4D object. And using the standard Adobe Edit Original, I can choose this. It launches us into C4D, where you can now see that I have the video composited behind it. I can choose my rotation tool. I can make my adjustments so that we look a little less rugged, a little more together here. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and save it. And now, when I click back to After Effects, wait for it. The change is applied. Thank you very much. Oh, and David, you were just working on that map with Terry, and I thought, why not use that map here, right? We're trying to represent the wild isles. So I took the Illustrator file from Terry, and using our tracking points, parented that to the hood of the car. So now if I go ahead and solo this, and we go full screen, and we play this back, now we've got our grill guard in 3D tracked on our 2D object with our map, and all is well in the world.
That looks great.
Yeah?
So,
yeah!
huge amount of productivity there. But one more request. This is
Yes.
supposed to be an adventure on an island, and the mountains are distracting me. Let's go ahead and open up the sky and make it look more like we're close to a beach.
Well, and you know, this actually brings up another great point, and another one of these great functions in After Effects, which is the idea, the concept of background or sky replacement. You see this all the time in films and movies, right, where they shoot on location and the sky wasn't as blue as they wanted. So this is a really common process, and to do that, you would typically implement something known as rotoscoping. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into my, open up my layer here. Now, a couple of years ago, we introduced the Roto Brush in After Effects, and that was an amazing tool because it really sped up the process of literally separating foreground images from the background. So I've gone ahead and done that for you, and when you take a look at this original Roto Brush pass, if I go into my matte view, you can see that it gets us, well, pretty close, but the problem is that all of those individual twigs, the branches, what really makes this look natural if we're going to composite something behind it, they're missing. Now again, this is a good start, but we'd have to do a lot of work to really preserve that background to make it look natural. So we thought to ourselves, why not leverage a technology that we have in another CC application like
Photoshop.
Leveraging a technology known as
Refine Edge.
And bring it into After Effects. This is with 1 cup of coffee.
This is why I'm also keeping a little bit more distance than I kept with Terry.
So my friends, I'm so pleased to introduce to you today that now inside After Effects CC, we have the Refine Edge tool, where now, just like in Photoshop, I can come along the edge of my tree line here, and I can trace along the tree line, being careful to preserve all of those little twigs, all those little branches, and also include some of the background so that it understands what to keep and what to eliminate, just like this as I trace along with my brush.
Now, while he's doing that, this is very much the same technology we have in Photoshop, but with one key difference. Unlike in Photoshop that applies it to one image, this will actually track frame to frame, track the differences, and actually adjust what it
It's going to propagate all the frames for you, and it's going to take something that was very hard. Let's go into our matte view and give you this beautiful, soft, yes. Oh. And if we go ahead, here, wait, hold on. Now here's the before. Here's the after, and David, as per your request, tree line. And now if we go ahead, let's go ahead and solo this here. Once again, full screen, and tree line preserved, blue sky, 3D, After Effects CC, Refine Edge. We did it! I don't know how that, yeah.
Well, it's good, and I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
But I would put wispy twigs and branches at the nearly impossible end of the spectrum. The impossible thing is hair. And you know, I've been noticing that you have really beautiful hair. So
well, thank you for noticing.
Okay, a little bit more distance.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, that's good. So I know you love. Jason loves to perform, and he has beautiful hair. What can After Effects do for you?
We're going somewhere with this.
That
right?
was Wasn't quite the setup we had planned.
So, interesting you should mention that, David. Well, I called upon my friends Vashi, Mike, and Eric, and we did a shoot one day, and we wanted to really put not only this technology, but some other refined edge technologies in After Effects to the test. So rather than just shoot on green screen or blue screen, which is pretty easy to remove and preserve all those wispy bits of hair, we tried something like, well, what about blue sky? People try and key against blue sky. Well, we didn't have blue sky on that day, but we had basically a very pale blue wall. So yes, oh, and thank you for the shirt, David.
Yes, you're
great.
welcome.
Thank you.
I've got
the
one
buttons
too.
were a little low.
Come to Sneaks, we got a number planned.
So they filmed me against this sort of blue sky wall. And when we used traditional keying techniques like the amazing key light, effectively you ended up with this very hard looking, again, the strands of hair aren't preserved, what's left of it at least. So we decided, how about use a new effect in After Effects known as Refine Soft Matte. And literally I was able to take this, drag and drop it, turn it on, and suddenly the strands of hair were preserved. But David, it wasn't enough just to film myself on this blue backdrop. It wasn't enough just to get dressed up in my best 70s clothes. I didn't want to just tell you guys about it. I wanted to sing about it.
Of course.
So, this is a work in progress, but here for you today, my friends, I present to you the Creative Cloud. Friends, I am not only an Adobe employee, I'm a Creative Cloud member. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Ladies and gentlemen, the never boring Jason Levine. All right, so now we have our assets, all of our images and graphics, and we have our video. All that's left to do is put it together in a website, and we'll make it a modern, responsive website that looks good across all the different devices. But before we do that, I wanted to share a little bit about the contributions that we've been making to the web. First, we've actively started supporting, and in some cases actually leading, a number of the W3C working groups. Things like CSS regions, exclusions, blend modes. Things that really focus on making the browsers themselves much more expressive. We've also made direct contributions now in these areas to WebKit, Blink, and Gecko. And it's been really fun. We started making the contributions about a year ago, and they're now starting to make their way through the process and into the shipping browsers. So I'm obviously proud of the work we're doing, and it's a small part of a much bigger industry commitment here. But I firmly believe that we're now collectively hitting a tipping point, where the web is now ready for a new generation of tools and services that help build the future HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript web. And that's where our edge tools and services come in. They're lightweight and they're task-oriented so that designers and developers can easily pick and choose the ones that they want to use if they have an existing current workflow that they want to augment. Or, of course, they work great together and give you a really complete end-to-end process. So to show that off, I'd like to invite up Jeff Veen이. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, David.
So for those of you who don't know Jeff, Jeff has spent most of his career in web design. He was a founding partner at Adaptive Path, and more recently was a co-founder and the CEO of Typekit, a company that was really made its mission to bring the world's fonts, all the beautiful fonts that we have, bring them to the web. Why weren't they there? So Jeff and the Typekit team joined Adobe about a year ago. In fact, I think we announced it at the last Max. And Jeff has taken on a broad role for us.
It's good to be back.
Yes. So one of the things we were talking about was that every time we meet a web designer coming from Adobe, they're like, "Oh, great, you guys are from Adobe. I love Photoshop. It's part of the it's an absolute integral part of the entire web workflow that we do." Right. And then they immediately follow it up with, "But can you guys please make it work with the new concepts of responsive design? It's really frustrating to go from these Photoshop comps and then have to try and build multi-device websites." So we've been working on that.
We absolutely have. So I built my first website 20 years ago, and if I had ever imagined what the web would become in these 2 decades since then, it's just absolutely been astounding. I think now is a great time to be at Adobe, and I'm really excited about it too. We're just completely rethinking how we provide tools and the tools that we make for designers and developers in this new web. So you're right about Photoshop. I think even if you hand code and you design right in the browser, Photoshop is still going to be part of that workflow. You making assets and things like that. So I want to show you a feature that we've added to Photoshop to try to make that more efficient. You can see here, I've got the Adventure Company website now. It's got all of those assets that David was talking about, that Terry and Jason just made. It's got the video down here. In fact, if I zoom out, you can see this is sort of a contemporary-looking website. And there's a nice scroll and a story that works its way down the page. But it has a lot of elements in it, and each one of those elements I have over here on its own tab, a well-organized document. But to get these into the website, to get these into my HTML, I'm going to have to isolate each one and pull it out into its own file. I'm going to have to save that file the right type in the right place and with a name. And even when I go through all those steps, I'm not going to have any indication of where they go in my document. I got to keep track of all of that. In fact, I put guides around each one of these so that so I could show you really visually, like, look at this. This is what I have to keep track of. And even once we do all of those steps, it's not a responsive layout. This is just for the desktop. So I'm going to have to do this again for a tablet-based layout so that works on that screen, and then another one for the phone. It's going to be a lot of work.
That would take literally forever.
Yeah.
And if you look at, you've done a nice job, obviously, putting these in the right layers. But I also see that the layers have these file extensions on them. What's that for?
You're very observant. Yes. Yeah, if you look down here, I'll just zoom in here a second. Actually, I won't. Well, you'll have to trust me here that we have a lot of file extensions on each one of the layers. Now, each one of these layers, for example, here in the center of the page, I've said that I want them to be JPEGs. Now, I could have put JPEG or PNG or even SVG. And I can do that for any one of the layers, or for a compound layer in a folder, I can label the folder, or even one of the smart objects. And once I do that, I can then tell Photoshop here under the File menu that I'd like to generate the web assets. And now you can see I've got 2 options here. I can generate web assets, and that'll take each one of these layers and make that file for me in the format that I want. Or I can say, generate a reflow project. And I'll show you, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll show you what that means here in just a second. So I'll select that, and here's my Adventure Company asset folder. So I'll just choose that, and we'll switch over to the Finder and jump right in here. And there's my images, and here come all those assets.
And they're still coming in, too.
They're still coming in.
Generated. This is going to save a ton of time, right?
It is. I know, right?
Yeah. Not just in terms of creating those assets, but also then you have to go and you have to place them all.
Yeah, that's right. And I would have to, right now, I just start with my HTML and figure all that out. So let me just pop up, and also generated for me is this Reflow file. So I'll open that up, and it'll launch Reflow. Now, Reflow is our tool for helping designers and developers communicate and collaborate about responsive design. So as you can see, the file opened up, and it's a good sort of representation of what I was just working on in Photoshop. And I can start to move this around and change little details. This is a WebKit canvas. Reflow was built out of the browser, right? So everything that I do here is going to look right when I go over to the browser. I'm going to get a real clear indication of type rendering and stuff like that. Here are all my CSS controls for each one of these elements, for the layout. Here's all of the styling and things like that. But most importantly, I can set breakpoints. Now, in responsive design, a breakpoint is a bit of CSS that tells browsers how to transform a layout for the different devices it's been showing on, for all the sizes there. So let me do that a second. I'll take this and just scale it down to about 600. It's about a vertical tablet size here. That'll work well. And now I'll just quickly say, this is how I'd like this laid out. And I mean quickly, I'm just going to kind of throw this together, put the navigation up and bring this up higher so that it's not falling off, and sort of like this.
And while you're doing that, obviously some elements when you go down to smaller screen sizes, especially smartphone sizes, just don't make sense. So how do you turn things on and off?
Right, so this headline, for example, I don't think it's going to work at a really small size, so I'll go down here to this menu at the bottom, and it just shows me a bunch of elements that I have, and I can control the CSS display property just like that. I'm not deleting the content, I'm just saying, at the smaller size, don't show that. Actually, you know what? I forgot to make my breakpoint, so there it is. Then at the bigger point, at the bigger size, I actually do want to show that. So there we go, on and off. Now my two sizes are actually going to look very different. And obviously, we would spend a lot more time on that, and I have, right? We have this version that's
out of the oven.
Yeah, there we go, right out of the oven, and there's my finished cake. So we've got the big size here for the browser, for the desktop browser. There's my tablet version. You can see the navigation is all laid out. I go down here to hear the phone version. The layout is very different. I've taken the navigation and put it under a menu and really relayed out everything. Now, each one of the elements here, right, has corresponding CSS with all of the media queries and breakpoints. So rather than just spitting out a bunch of tangled mess that I'd give to a developer and say, all right, all yours, now go, we can collaborate on this. And I can say, here's the CSS just for that element. And of course, I can tweak this or whatever, but I'll copy and paste this into whatever system, web framework, content management, whatever I'm using, right? It gives me a lot of control over it element by element.
Right, and this is obviously a huge step forward from what we've had in the past. We're going literally from Photoshop to these Reflow documents to the CSS that you can start to exchange with people. And this makes a big difference. I mean, obviously, when we're talking about screen sizes and aspect ratios, you really need to perfect that. But you know, the real trick is actually seeing them on devices, because it's not just about the screen size on devices. It's different browsers, different versions, and that can be a real problem.
That's right. So we really do need to see it on the devices. I've got a bunch down here. So why don't we start to preview this? Here's a Nexus 10. I have an iPad here as well. We'll take a look at that. Got an iPhone. So there we go. We've got the devices. Now, what I'm going to use is a set of technologies that we call Edge Inspect. And what that does is give me an automatic wireless connection between the devices here and what I'm working on the desktop. And now we've integrated that into Reflow. So here you can see I've got an inspect menu. It says iPad, iPhone, Samsung. We're connected to all of them. Now watch this. I just turn it on, and on our devices, there's my design. Isn't that great?
And it's a live connection, right?
I'll tell you, if you've done this in the past manually, you know, like you got to move your code onto a server and get the URL, and you have to get the URL onto these devices, and then you make a little change over here, you know, like this, and then you have to go back. Oh, look, there they all updated. That's great. I think I'll put it back. It wraps. So I'll do something really obvious here and go down. I'm going to add a CSS filter to this image, and we'll use opacity. And watch it, you know, I'll do something really obvious, move that over, and there they go. They all update. Well, I've moved things around now, but you can see right now I can iterate. I can really be in the process.
Doesn't look so good. Why don't we put it back?
Yeah.
There we go.
Thanks.
Great.
Good.
So now that's obviously going to be a big time saver in building for these devices. But as I was talking about earlier, we've really been focused on our heritage of interactivity and animation as well.
That's right.
And we've been making contributions to the browser, but we've also been working on a new tool called Edge Animate, which has made a lot of progress over the last year.
It really has. Let me show you that. Now, we have the center of the page here in Reflow that shows all of these places that we go. A great place for interactivity, and open this up a little more. So I'll just get out of Reflow here, and let me switch over to Edge Animate. Now, this is a timeline-based tool for doing interactive content that'll work on any device using JavaScript, CSS, HTML5. And here you can see I've got the center of the page here. Now, we've done a ton of work to this already, and it'll kind of open up and reveal and show a map and all that kind of stuff, which I'll show you in a minute. But first, I want to draw people's attention to this. So I'm just going to have this bird right here just sort of fly across the page to begin as a nice, subtle little animation. So, you know, timeline-based tool, I'll just drag that out now that I've selected the bird to about 4 seconds. And I'm going to switch from an XY straight path to a motion path. And when I do that, I'll just say I want the bird to start where it was and end up just right there. There's my path, and it's as simple as just dragging out some beautiful curves. If you've ever done this by hand with a bunch of JavaScript, you know, oh my gosh, how much time that would take. Why don't we preview this in Chrome and see how that looks. So there we go.
Looks more like a drunk duck, perhaps. But
Thanks.
Maybe if you can try swooping swan, perhaps?
More swan, less drunk duck. All right. Well, I'm no professional animator, David. So let me just move that back up a little bit. And, whoop, sorry, there we go. I'm just flying all over the place. All right, we'll smooth that out a little bit. Now I'll turn back on this auto orient feature. That'll use CSS rotation to keep my bird following the motion path so that when I do this again, we get it much nicer. There we go. I think that looks really nice.
Yeah, definitely moving in the right direction. Now,
yeah.
Backing all of this is code, right? I mean, everything you're doing here is generating more code.
All of this stuff built in Animate, right? And you're right, like all of this content popping up, and if I view source, it's all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I can literally just grab this script and this style and put the div tag where I want the stage in my document. And again, anywhere that I'm doing some work, I can do that.
That's great. So we've also, one of the things, speaking of code, that we've been working on is if you look at the current coding tools out there, they're really lightweight, or they're very visual and a bit heavy. And now, you know, coding tools are a very personal choice for developers,
right.
But we started wondering if there was a sweet spot in the middle that could get the benefits of the lightweight coding and just surface visual elements when you need them most. And that we started an open source project called Brackets. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we started Brackets, and we host this project on GitHub. It's gotten a lot of community big GitHub fans. Great, excellent. We have a lot of community support from that. People bringing submissions in. We've been bundling those up and not only releasing Brackets, but also taking them and building it out as Edge code, which is included in Creative Cloud and includes a lot of integration. So let me just show you Edge code a second. And here, as you can see, right, I'm starting to bring the whole project together, and I'm going to do that by hand, doing some hand coding here. My script tags are right there. That'll bring in the Edge Animate code along with the style and everything right there that I need. And you're right about trying to blend the power of hand coding with visual design as well. So I've got some really great shortcuts. I mouse over any image tag, I just see that image. So I have to try to keep track of all of those elements that I had in the Photoshop document. And we've recently added live preview to Chrome, really live preview. So I literally just click the button and Chrome does what it needs to do and shows me my document back over here. So not as much switching around and stuff like that. I can mouse over colors and I can quickly see those colors, but I also can do quick edits. So I can very quickly just say like this and I get a visual color picker. And I can start to, look at that, and it just, as I move this around, the CSS file is updating up there just like that. So
it's also inspected the CSS files and given you sort of some selected colors that you might want to.
Pulled all of the colors that it found in the CSS file here, so I know I can just quickly click through and say, you know what, I think I'll save it like that.
Right.
So,
all right, so let's talk about connectivity on devices again.
Yep, that's right. So I'll switch back over here. Another thing we've done with Edge Inspect is made it a Chrome extension. So that means any tool that you're using or any workflow that you have, you can use Inspect right here as a menu, right? So now all I have to do is hit refresh, and we'll get the color over here. Well, almost all of it. There we go. We've got the color over there.
Looks like this one's still a little bit off.
Yeah. Well, now how many times have you had an executive come up to you and say, it doesn't work on my phone? Yeah, so that happens to me all the time, too.
It's part of the job description.
It is.
Don't blame your executives.
So what I can do very quickly, now, you know, in the past, if I've got remote developers or designers or whatever, how do I get it, and how do we do this debugging? So what we have here in Edge Inspect is this little camera icon. Now watch what happens when I click this camera icon. You see that? The Edge Inspect just told all of these devices to take a screenshot of what it's displaying and then send it back to this computer. I've got a shortcut to the folder where they are, and here we go. There's my iPad, there's my Nexus, and here's the iPhone layout with the problem.
You could easily just send that off and get things clicking.
Yep, there we go.
We've made a ton of progress. We've been very busy over the last 18 months. So what we just looked at was Photoshop now being integrated completely through all the way into a responsive design process. That's a big step forward for a lot of designers, I think. And also a whole new family of tools that are specifically dedicated on the open web already with millions of users there. So we've come a long way since the last Mac. So
that's right.
Stick around, Jeff. We got one more thing to obviously show.